The Powell Sport Wagon Pickup is a unique truck with an interesting story. Made from 1955 to 1957, it was the brainchild of two brothers, Hayward and Channing Powell. These guys weren't your typical car makers. They started out making motor scooters. After World War II, America was booming and people wanted affordable cars. The Powell brothers saw an opportunity. They decided to make a truck that was practical and cheap, but here's the twist. They used old car parts to do it. They got their parts from junkyards in Southern California. They looked for 1940 to 1941 Plymouths that were being thrown away as people bought newer cars. The brothers took these old parts, fixed them up, and used them to build their new trucks. They didn't just use any old parts, though. They carefully picked out good chassis, engines, and transmissions. These parts were sent to another company to be fixed up before they went to the Powell factory in Compton, California. At the factory, they put these refurbished parts into new truck bodies they designed themselves. The bodies were mostly made of stamped steel, but the front was fiberglass. This mix of materials helped keep costs down. They also used flat panels instead of curved ones to make production easier and cheaper. Each Powell pickup was put together by hand. The workers made sure all the old parts were up to scratch. Then they painted the trucks and put in basic interiors before selling them. Even though they used old parts, the Powell brothers sold these as new trucks. They were proud of using recycled parts because it made their trucks affordable. They managed to keep the price under $1,100, which was way cheaper than other trucks at the time. The Powell pickup looked simple but practical. Its body had straight, flat panels that were easy to make. The fiberglass front end was another smart choice. It was cheaper than steel and easier to shape. They got help from local boat yards to make these fiberglass parts. Inside, the truck was pretty basic too. The seats were just vinyl stretched over foam pads. No fancy springs here. The dashboard only had the essential gauges and controls. Even the windows were simple. They slid open instead of rolling down. One cool feature was a tubular storage compartment built into the side of the truck bed. It pulled out like a drawer and was perfect for storing long items like fishing rods. This was a hit with outdoor enthusiasts. Under the hood, the Powell pickup had inline-six engines from those old Plymouths. These engines were chosen because they were tough and easy to fix. Before going into the new trucks, the engines were completely rebuilt. The truck's suspension came from the same old Plymouths. It gave a ride more like a car than a typical truck, which made it comfortable for everyday driving. But it could still handle heavy loads when needed. The Powell brothers mainly sold their trucks in Southern California. They advertised them as affordable and practical, with a starting price of $1,095. They relied on local ads and word of mouth to sell their trucks. Some people loved the Powell pickup. They liked how simple and tough it was, and how unique it looked. The storage compartment and big truck bed were especially popular with people who used their trucks for work or outdoor activities, but not everyone was sold on the idea. Some folks weren't sure about buying a truck made from used parts. Others thought it was too basic inside compared to other vehicles at the time. By 1957, they ran out of suitable Plymouth parts and had to stop making trucks. In total, they only made about 1,000 Powell pickups. While it wasn't a big commercial success, people who owned them really liked them. Today, the Powell pickup is seen as ahead of its time. It mixed the comfort of a car with the usefulness of a truck, kind of like modern SUVs. Using recycled parts was also forward-thinking, as people now care more about saving resources. The Studebaker Champ is a cool part of automotive history that marks the end of Studebaker's time making trucks. This light-duty pickup was built from 1960 to 1964 when Studebaker was trying hard to stay in business during big changes in the car world. Back in the late 1950s, Studebaker was in deep financial trouble. Their E-Series trucks, which had been popular since 1949, were getting old and couldn't compete with the big players like Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. Studebaker knew they needed a new, modern truck to stay in the game, but they were seriously low on cash. Studebaker's bosses saw they needed a fresh truck to keep up, but they were really tight on money. Unlike the big car companies, Studebaker couldn't afford to design and build a completely new truck from scratch. So they had to get creative and find smart ways to make a new vehicle using parts they already had. In 1959, Studebaker launched the Lark, a compact car that became a surprise hit. The Lark did well partly because its design cleverly reused parts from older Studebaker models. It was built on a shorter version of the frame from Studebaker's big cars, which helped save money on development. This smart approach became the blueprint for creating the Studebaker Champ. Duncan McRae, the main designer at Studebaker, was given the job of creating the new truck. Because money was so tight, McRae decided to use the Lark's frame and front-end design as the starting point for the new truck. This smart move let Studebaker save money on development while still making a truck that looked modern and appealing. To turn the Lark into a truck, Studebaker made several changes. They raised the truck's height, which meant they had to add bigger bumpers. These bumpers were moved down to fit with the truck's taller stance. The design team also had to close off the back of the cab, which had been open in the Lark. This led to them adding a sliding rear window, which was pretty unique at the time, and later became a standard feature in pickup trucks across the industry. The cab itself was changed to fit onto the existing E-Series truck frame. This mix of new and old parts resulted in a truck that worked well but looked a bit cobbled together. Even with these challenges, the Champ's design was innovative for its time, especially given how little money Studebaker had to work with. However, the mismatched cab and cargo bed design would later be criticized and seen as a visible sign of the company's money troubles. When it came to engines, the Studebaker Champ offered a range of options to appeal to different types of buyers, from those needing a basic work truck to those wanting something more powerful. The base engine was a 170 cubic inch flathead straight-six engine that produced 90 horsepower. This engine was an updated version of an older design showing how Studebaker was using existing tech to keep production costs down. It was okay for light work, but didn't have enough power for heavy jobs or towing. For buyers who needed more power, Studebaker offered a bigger 245 cubic inch straight-six engine. This one made 118 horsepower, making it better for those who needed their truck to do more. But this engine was only available for the first year, probably because not many people wanted it, and V8 engines were becoming more popular among truck buyers. Seeing that people wanted more powerful trucks, Studebaker also offered two V8 engine options for the Champ. The first was a 259 cubic inch V8 engine that made 180 horsepower. This engine gave a big performance boost compared to the six-cylinder options and made the Champ more competitive with other V8 trucks on the market. The second V8 option was a 289 cubic inch engine that could be set up to make either 210 or 225 horsepower, depending on whether it had a 2-barrel or 4-barrel carburetor. This was the most powerful engine you could get in the Champ, aimed at buyers who needed a truck that could handle heavier loads and tougher work. The Champ also came with different transmission options. You could choose between 3-speed and 4-speed manual transmissions. Most models came standard with the 3-speed manual, while the 4-speed manual was an option, especially on the V8 models. If you preferred an automatic transmission, Studebaker offered the Flight-O-Matic Borg-Warner automatic transmission, but you could only get this with the V8 engines. Even with these engine and transmission choices, the Champ was still seen as a bit outdated in terms of its mechanical design. The truck still used leaf springs for both the front and rear suspension, a design that other trucks were starting to replace with more advanced suspension systems. Also, the flathead straight-six engines were old-fashioned and didn't have the efficiency or power of newer overhead valve engines that were becoming standard in the industry. Overall, the Studebaker Champ's performance was a mix of old and new technologies. While it offered a range of engine options that could meet different buyers' needs, its reliance on older mechanical parts limited its appeal in a market that was quickly advancing. This mix of factors ultimately contributed to the truck's modest sales performance. When the Champ first came out in 1960, it had a pontoon-style bed. This bed design was curved and somewhat rounded, which gave the truck a unique look. However, the design wasn't very practical, as it offered less cargo space compared to more modern, squared-off truck beds. Recognizing this problem, Studebaker made a big change to the Champ's design in 1961 by introducing a new space-side bed. The Speyside bed showed how resourceful Studebaker could be. Instead of designing a new bed from scratch, the company bought the tooling for the bed from Dodge, which had used it on their 1958 to 1960 swept-line trucks. This bed design was much more practical, offering more cargo space and a more modern look. However, because the bed was originally designed for a different truck, it didn't perfectly match the width of the Champ's cab. This mismatch gave the truck a somewhat disjointed appearance, with the cab and bed not lining up as smoothly as they might have if they had been designed together. Despite how it looked, the new bed was a practical improvement over the previous design. It came in two lengths, a 6.5-foot version and an 8-foot version. This made the Champ more versatile and able to handle a wider range of tasks. The mismatched design, while not ideal, was a compromise that allowed Studebaker to offer a more competitive product without spending a lot of money on developing a new bed design. Another unique aspect of the Champ's design was its interior. The truck's cab was based on the Studebaker Lark, which meant that it had a more car-like interior than many other trucks of the time. This included a padded dashboard, a feature that wasn't common in trucks back then. The Champ also offered an AM radio as an option, which added a touch of modern convenience to the truck. However, despite these modern touches, the truck still used older design elements such as pedals that came up from the floor rather than hanging from above, a design that was becoming less common in newer vehicles. The Champ was also notable for being one of the first U.S. production trucks to feature a sliding rear window. This design allowed for better airflow in the cab, which was a welcome feature for drivers who spent long hours on the road. This feature, which was innovative at the time, would later become standard in many pickup trucks. In its first year on the market, the Champ sold about 5,000 units. While this was a decent number given Studebaker's limited resources and marketing capabilities, it wasn't enough to make the Champ a major player in the truck market. The following year, sales stayed about the same, with another 5,000 units sold. This consistency in sales showed that while the Champ had a niche market, it wasn't attracting the wider customer base that Studebaker needed to ensure the truck's long-term success. The Champ's best year came in 1962, when it sold 7,325 units. This increase in sales was likely due to the introduction of the new Speyside bed, which made the truck more practical for everyday use. However, even this sales figure was modest compared to the volumes being achieved by the big three automakers, which were producing hundreds of thousands of trucks each year. The Hudson Big Boy C28 from 1947 is a cool piece of car history that really stands out. It's not just about how it looks, but also the story behind it. Hudson Motor Car Company made these big boy trucks as a mix between a comfy passenger car and a tough pickup truck. This was pretty special back then, because most vehicles were either one or the other, not both. Let's go back to 1939, when Hudson first came up with the Big Boy series. They were mainly known for making regular cars, but they saw a chance to make a truck that was strong enough for work, but also stylish enough to drive around town. They were thinking of small business owners, farmers, and anyone else who needed a reliable truck but didn't want to sacrifice style. The first big boy trucks looked a lot like Hudson's passenger cars. They had long, smooth bodies with flowing lines and shiny chrome grills. This made them look fancier than other trucks at the time. Hudson wanted to appeal to people who needed a vehicle that could do it all, work hard during the week, and look good for family outings on weekends. By the time 1947 rolled around, the Big Boy C28 had gone through a few changes. It still kept a lot of its pre-war look, with just a few updates to match what people wanted after World War II. The truck had a steel body on a strong frame, with a big cargo bed that was great for carrying heavy stuff. One thing that made the Big Boy really popular was how versatile it was. It could handle all sorts of jobs, from hauling goods to taking the family out for a drive. This made it a hit with small business owners who needed one vehicle to do everything. But they didn't make too many of these trucks, which is why they're so rare and valuable to collectors today. Under the hood, you'd find a 262 cubic inch flathead six-cylinder engine. This engine was known for being really reliable and tough, which is why truck buyers loved it. It could produce about 102 horsepower, which was plenty to power the truck even when it was fully loaded. The engine was paired with a 3-speed manual transmission that had a shifter on the steering column. This was pretty unusual for trucks back then, as most of them had shifters on the floor. The column shifter made it easier for drivers to use, especially in tight spaces. The Big Boy's suspension system was another area where Hudson showed off their engineering skills. Instead of using the standard solid axle found in most trucks, Hudson gave the Big Boy an independent front suspension system called autopoise. They borrowed this from their passenger cars, and it made the ride much smoother and more comfortable. The back suspension used leaf springs, which helped support the weight of the truck and its cargo. The truck bed was one of its best features. It was 48 square feet, which was bigger than most other trucks at the time. The bed was made of steel, making it strong and long-lasting, and it could carry really heavy loads. This is why farmers, construction workers, and other professionals who needed a tough truck for work really liked the Big Boy. Hudson designed the 1947 Big Boy to be more than just a work truck. They knew that many truck buyers wanted a vehicle that could do many things, so they added features that made it more comfortable and practical than other trucks of the time. Inside the cab, the Big Boy had a Weathermaster heater, which was a luxury for trucks back then. This heater kept the driver and passengers warm during cold months, making the truck comfortable to use all year round. There was also a 30-hour clock on the dashboard, which was handy for keeping track of time on long trips. Another cool feature was the radio. The truck came with a Zenith radio that had foot-operated controls for tuning and volume. This was unique and made it easier for the driver to use the radio while keeping both hands on the steering wheel. The steering wheel itself had a horn ring with chrome around it, adding a touch of class to the interior. The seats were covered in tough fabric, making them comfortable for long drives. They could also be adjusted, so the driver could find the perfect position. The truck's interior was designed to be practical and comfortable, with plenty of space to store tools and other equipment. The dashboard was well organized, with gauges and controls that were easy to read and reach. The Hudson Big Boy was made during an important time in car history. Right after World War II, there was a huge demand for new vehicles because many people had put off buying cars and trucks during the war. But at the same time, there were shortages of materials, which made it hard for car companies to make enough vehicles to meet the demand. Even with these challenges, Hudson managed to make a small number of Big Boy trucks in 1946 and 1947. They focused on making high-quality trucks instead of trying to make a lot of them. The fact that there aren't many Hudson Big Boy C28 trucks left is one of the reasons why collectors value them so much today. Only about 3% of all the vehicles Hudson made in 1946 and 1947 were trucks, which made them rare even back then. The truck's unique design and advanced engineering have made it a favorite among people who love vintage vehicles, and fully restored models can sell for high prices at auctions. The Ford Durango, made from 1979 to 1982, is a rare and interesting car with a cool story. It came about because Ford needed to replace the Ranchero, a popular car pickup combo they stopped making in 1979. The idea was pretty simple. Take the Ford Fairmont Futura, which was a two-door car, and turn it into something like the Ranchero. This wasn't an official Ford project, though. They teamed up with a company called National Coach Products in Gardena, California to make it happen. The whole thing started when Ford decided to stop making the Ranchero. People liked the Ranchero because it was comfortable like a car, but useful like a truck. But by the late 1970s, Ford was changing the cars they made, so they couldn't keep making the Ranchero the same way. They thought the Ford Fairmont, which they started making in 1978, would be a good replacement. The Fairmont was built on something called the Fox body platform, which Ford also used for the Mustang and other cars. They liked this platform because it was light, strong, and easy to change. A Ford designer named Dick Nesbitt came up with the idea for the Durango. He thought they could turn the Fairmont Futura coupe into a car pickup. The Fairmont Futura had a strong middle part, which made it good for this kind of change. Nesbitt's idea was pretty cool, but the big bosses at Ford weren't sure about it. Instead of making it themselves, they asked National Coach Products to do it. They probably did this because fewer people were buying car pickups, and Ford wasn't sure if making a new one was a good idea. National Coach Products took on the job of turning the Fairmont Futura into the Ford Durango. They had to make some big changes. They took off the back of the car and put on a pickup bed made of fiberglass. They also made a new tailgate with fiberglass and put the tail lights in it. This was tricky because they needed the lights to be visible even when the tailgate was open, so they had to come up with a special design. They also put in a new back window that fit with the pickup bed. These were big changes, but they didn't have to completely remake the car, which helped keep costs down. They didn't make many Durangos from the start. They made the first one in 1979, but they didn't really get going until 1981. The delay was because Jim Stevenson, who was really important for the project, got sick. Stevenson was good at working on car bodies and painting, and they needed his skills, but he had kidney problems, which stopped the project for almost 2 years. By the time he could work again, people weren't as interested in car pickups like the Durango anymore. Even with these problems, National Coach Products made some Durangos. Most people think they made between 120 and 212, but no one knows for sure. Some Ford dealerships sold them, but they didn't advertise them much, so not many people knew about them. That's why they're so rare today. You could get the Durango with different engines, the same ones that came in the Fairmont Futura. There was a 2.3-liter 4-cylinder engine, a 3.3-liter 6-cylinder engine, and a 4.2-liter V8 engine. With the 2.3-liter engine, you could choose between a 4-speed manual transmission or a 3-speed automatic transmission. The 6-cylinder and V8 engines only came with the automatic transmission. Most Durangos had the 6-cylinder engine because it was a good mix of power and fuel efficiency. The V8 engine was stronger, but not as common because it cost more and used more gas. The Durango came with some cool features to make it more useful. You could get a fiberglass cover for the pickup bed, special back shocks that you could adjust with air to make the ride better when carrying heavy stuff, and custom wheels that made it look different. It also had a hidden storage space under the bed, which was handy for extra storage. You could also get a sunroof that popped up, rails for the cargo area, and tie-downs to secure your stuff. The Durango also cost more than its main competitor, the Chevrolet El Camino, which started at $6,988. Turning a Fairmont Futura into a Durango added about $2,000 to the price, making it more expensive. This probably made it less appealing to buyers who could get an El Camino for less money. Even though it wasn't very successful, some people really liked the Durango. Many of the ones still around have been changed with parts from the Ford Mustang, which uses the same basic design. People often put in the Mustang's 5.0-liter V8 engine and add Mustang wheels and tires. These changes have helped keep car fans interested in the Durango, even though it wasn't very popular when it was new. Today, the Ford Durango is a rare and unusual car that gives us a look at how cars were designed and made in a different time. The Volkswagen Rabbit pickup, also known as the VW Caddy in some places, is a one-of-a-kind vehicle with a fascinating origin story. It was created during a time of fuel shortages and economic upheaval in the 1970s, when Volkswagen needed a practical, affordable, and fuel-efficient vehicle to boost its popularity, as the Volkswagen Beetle's fame was fading. Volkswagen set up a factory in the US to compete with Japanese automakers like Toyota, Nissan, and Honda. They took over an unfinished Chrysler plant in Pennsylvania and started making the Rabbit pickup there. It was introduced as a no-nonsense solution to the gas crisis, offering the utility of a pickup truck without the hefty fuel bills. Now, the Rabbit pickup was based on the VW Rabbit, which was the American version of the Golf Mark I. But unlike most trucks at the time that had a separate body and frame, the Rabbit pickup had a unibody design. This unique construction gave it better traction when carrying heavy loads and more stable handling in bad weather. Despite its compact size, the Rabbit pickup had a decent cargo bed that was about 5 feet wide and could carry up to 1,100 pounds. It was basically a Mark I Golf with a small truck bed instead of rear doors. You could get it with either a 1.6-liter diesel engine that made 52 horsepower or a 1.7-liter gas engine with 78 horsepower. The diesel came with a 5-speed manual, while the gas engine only had a 4-speed. The Rabbit pickup's simple and sturdy design made it pretty reliable. The engines were known for being tough and efficient. Its handy size and surprising amount of cargo room made it great for everyday tasks. Even though it had a lot going for it, the Rabbit pickup didn't sell very well and was discontinued not long after it launched. Over time, it's gained a loyal following among classic car fans who appreciate its one-of-a-kind style and practicality. The VW Rabbit pickup shows how the company could adapt and innovate when faced with changing market conditions. It combined the usefulness of a pickup with the efficiency and maneuverability of a small car, making it truly ahead of its time. Today, it's a cool reminder of a past era that continues to be loved by enthusiasts all over the world. 1992, GMC Sonoma GT. A unique vehicle with an intriguing backstory and rare details that make it a must-have for enthusiasts. First off, let's talk about why this truck even exists. Back in 1992, GMC wanted to offer a more affordable alternative to their high-performance turbocharged pickup, the GMC Cyclone. The Cyclone was a beast, but it also came with a pretty hefty price tag of $27,465. Enter the Sonoma GT, starting at a much more reasonable $16,770. It's no wonder it earned the nickname Poor Man's Cyclone. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of what makes this truck so special. Under the hood, you'll find a central port injection 4.3-liter L35 V6 engine paired with an automatic 4L60 transmission that sends all that power to the rear wheels. And we're talking some serious power here. 195 horsepower at 4,500 revolutions per minute and 260 pound-feet of torque at 3,600 revolutions per minute. That's nothing to sneeze at. But the Sonoma GT isn't just about raw power. GMC also gave it some serious upgrades to make it a true sport package. We're talking recalibrated Bilstein shocks, a torsion bar setup with dual-stage leaf springs, and power brakes. And let's not forget about those BF Goodrich Comp TA tires that keep this truck glued to the road. Of course, what's a sport package without some killer looks to match? The Sonoma GT features a unique Cyclone-inspired cladding kit, with the same front and rear bumper as its more expensive sibling. The interior is just as impressive, with black and red piping door inserts and bucket seats that scream performance. But here's the thing. GMC only made 806 of these bad boys back in 1992. That's right, just 806, which makes the Sonoma GT the rarest truck from the Sport Machines ring. They came in a variety of colors too, from the standard monochromatic black to apple red, white, aspen blue, teal, and forest green. So there you have it, the 1992 GMC Sonoma GT in all its glory. A rare and powerful truck that was built to offer enthusiasts a more affordable way to get their hands on some serious performance. The Studebaker Transtar was a truck made from 1956 to 1964. It was an important vehicle in American car history, even though many people don't know much about it. Studebaker was having a hard time keeping up with other car companies, and the Transtar showed how they were trying to change. These trucks were part of Studebaker's E-Series. They were known for being tough and looking unique. Studebaker wanted to make a truck that was good for work, but also looked nice enough for regular people to want. The Transtar first came out in 1956. It was a big change from Studebaker's older M-Series trucks, which they had been making since World War II. By the mid-1950s, those old trucks were starting to look and feel outdated. Studebaker needed to make something new to keep selling trucks, so they came up with the Transtar. You could get the Transtar in different sizes. There were half-ton, three-quarter-ton, and one-ton models. You could also choose different types like pickups, chassis cabs, or stake beds. This meant the Transtar could be used for all sorts of jobs. One cool thing about the Transtar was its new cab design. They took the cab from their C-Series trucks, 1949 to 1955, but gave it a more modern look in the front. In 1956, they even used a fiberglass grille. This was lighter than metal and didn't rust, which was better than what other trucks had. Under the hood, the Transtar usually had a Studebaker inline-six engine. This engine was 245 cubic inches big and made 101 horsepower. If you wanted more power, you could get a V8 engine instead. The V8 was 259 cubic inches and made 170 horsepower. Having a V8 option was a big deal because it meant the truck could pull heavier loads and go faster. Most Transtars came with a 3-speed manual transmission, but you could also get a 4-speed manual if you wanted. The Transtar had a special suspension system. In the front, it used coil springs that moved separately from each other. This made the ride smoother than other trucks that used leaf springs. The back still used leaf springs, which were good for carrying heavy stuff. This mix of front and back suspension meant the Transtar could do all sorts of jobs, from light work to heavy hauling. Inside the Transtar, things were pretty basic compared to today's trucks, but it was comfy for its time. The cab had a bench seat that could fit 3 people. The dashboard was simple, with gauges that were easy to read. All the controls were close to the driver. The windshield was big and flat, which made it easy to see out of. This was really important for safety, especially when carrying big loads. You could add extra things to your Transtar if you wanted. Studebaker offered options like a heater, a radio, and a spotlight. These let people make their trucks fit their needs better. The heater was really popular in cold places, and a lot of drivers liked having a radio for long trips. The Transtar was designed to look different from other trucks. It had a big, bold grille made of fiberglass. This grille looked cool and didn't rust like metal ones did. It was also lighter. The truck had big round headlights built into the fenders, which made it look smooth and modern. The fenders were rounded too. The Transtar was roomy and comfortable. The seat could move back and forth so the driver could find the right position. It was covered in tough vinyl that was easy to clean. The dashboard had a big speedometer in the middle. The bed of the Transtar came in different lengths depending on how big the truck was. It was made of steel and had a flat floor that made it easy to load things. The sides were tall to keep stuff from falling out. There were also hooks to tie things down with. In 1957, Studebaker made a simpler version of the Transtar called the Scotsman. They did this because the economy was tough and they needed a cheaper truck to sell. The Scotsman was for people who needed a good truck but didn't want to pay for extra features. You could get it as a pickup or a delivery van. The Scotsman used a lot of the same parts as the Transtar, but it was more basic to save money. It had a simpler grille made of steel instead of fiberglass. It didn't have as much shiny trim, and you could only get it in a few colors like black, white, and blue. This helped keep the price down. The Scotsman had the same engine choices as the Transtar, but most people got it with the smaller inline-6 engine because it was cheaper. You could get it with a 3-speed or a 4-speed manual transmission. Even though it was simple, a lot of people liked the Scotsman, especially in rural areas. They liked that it was tough and straightforward. But the Scotsman also showed that Studebaker was having problems. They were finding it hard to compete with bigger companies like Ford and Chevrolet, who could make trucks for less money. The Scotsman helped Studebaker keep selling trucks during a tough time, but it wasn't enough to fix all their problems. The 1955 GMC Blue Chip Pickup is an absolute gem in the world of classic trucks. This vehicle has a fascinating history and some really cool features that make it stand out from the crowd. Let's dive in and explore what makes this pickup so special. First off, 1955 was a pretty unique year for GMC and Chevrolet trucks. The year started with trucks that were pretty similar to the 1954 models, but halfway through, they introduced a whole new generation of trucks with a fresh look. These new trucks had a scalloped hood, a wraparound windshield, and hooded headlights that gave them a really distinct appearance. This new generation was called the Second Series, and it hit the market on March 25, 1955. The trucks made before this were known as the First Series. Now, the Blue Chip Pickup line was sold alongside the Chevrolet Task Force trucks, but it had some subtle design changes to make it stand out. These trucks were produced from 1955 all the way until 1959, which is a pretty impressive run. When it comes to the details and specs, the 1955 GMC Blue Chip Pickup had some really cool upgrades. They added a V8 engine option and switched to a 12-volt electrical system, which was a big deal at the time. The base engine was still the reliable 248 cubic inch inline-6, which put out 125 horsepower at 3,600 revolutions per minute and 214 pound-feet of torque at 1,550 revolutions per minute. But with the Second Series, they introduced a new 287 cubic inch V8 from Pontiac that cranked out 155 horsepower and 246 pound-feet of torque. That's some serious power for a truck from the 1950s. These trucks came in a few different configurations. The 1/2 ton 100 series could be a chassis and cab, pickup, panel truck, or a Suburban. The short bed had a wheelbase of 116 inches in the first series and 114 inches in the second series, while the long bed had a wheelbase of 125.25 inches in the first series and 123.25 inches in the second series. To give you an idea of the weight, a second series short wheelbase 1/2 ton pickup with the inline 6 engine weighed in at 3,375 pounds, while a 3/4 ton long wheelbase pickup with the same engine tipped the scales at 3,750 pounds. So, why was this truck made in the first place? Well, back in the 1950s, pickup trucks were primarily used for work. They weren't the family vehicles that we see today. The 1955 GMC Blue Chip pickup was built to be a tough, reliable workhorse that could handle all sorts of jobs. The addition of the V8 engine and the 12-volt electrical system made it even more capable and versatile. Now, you might be wondering why these trucks are so rare today. There are a few reasons for that. First, the production numbers weren't super high. We don't have exact figures, but GMC built around 83,000 light trucks in 1955. Second, a lot of these trucks were used for heavy-duty work, which means they got a lot of wear and tear. Not many of them survived in great condition. And finally, as these trucks have gotten older, they've become highly sought after by collectors, which has made them even rarer and more valuable. In the end, the 1955 GMC Blue Chip pickup is an incredible piece of automotive history. Its unique design, powerful performance, and the role it played in the evolution of pickup trucks make it a truly fascinating vehicle. The 1979 GMC Sierra 1500 is a classic pickup truck that has captured the hearts of collectors and enthusiasts alike. Let's dive into the fascinating history and features that make this vehicle so special. First off, the Sierra 1500 was part of the third generation of CK trucks produced by General Motors from 1973 to 1991. The 1979 model specifically was a full-size pickup designed for the Chevrolet CK trim. GM used the name Sierra to distinguish between various trims like the Sierra Classic and Sierra Grande. The letter K indicated a four-wheel drive model, while C meant rear-wheel drive. Under the hood, the 79 Sierra packed a punch with a 350 cubic inch, 5.7-liter lightweight V8 engine. This powerhouse featured 16 valves, with 2 valves per cylinder, and churned out an impressive 125 horsepower at 3,600 revolutions per minute. The torque was no slouch either, rated at 225 pound-feet at 1,800 revolutions per minute. The engine block was made of sturdy cast iron, while the cylinder heads were crafted from lightweight aluminum alloys. Diesel fuel kept this beast running, utilizing an efficient indirect fuel injection system. The 1979 Sierra also offered flexibility with its wheelbase options. You could choose from a short wheelbase of 117.5 inches, a long wheelbase of 131.5 inches, or even a super long wheelbase spanning an impressive 164.5 inches. The grille also got a makeover, incorporating the parking lights into the headlight facade for a sleek, integrated look. And, if you wanted to stand out from the crowd, GMC introduced a new color option called Oyster to complement the existing choices. So, why was the Sierra produced in the first place? Well, it was a favorite among farmers and construction workers who needed a reliable workhorse. But the square body design also made it an attractive personal vehicle for many Americans. It was one of the first trucks to offer a dedicated diesel engine, setting it apart from the competition. Fast forward to today, and the 1979 GMC Sierra Classic has become a highly sought-after collector's item. While Ford may have dominated the half-ton truck market, GMC still had a strong showing in '79. Being the underdog pushed them to differentiate themselves and appeal to a growing audience that was shifting away from larger vehicles. Despite a base price of $4,895 and a production run of 120,430 units, finding a 1979 GMC Sierra for sale today is quite a challenge. Its rarity has only added to its allure among collectors who scour the nation in search of these automotive gems.